Hello everyone, welcome to the show. My name is Spencer Walsh. This is Newsflash. On the show, Trump just gave Benjamin Netanyahu a major boost during his really tight re-election campaign with a tweet posted on Thursday. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, 2020 Democratic contenders are staying away from the big APAC conference this year. Joe Biden is Hillary Clinton 2.0. We'll tell you why. Talk about possibly gerrymandering, saving the GOP for a bigger loss in 2018. Something that we kind of knew what happened, but now we get the details on that. Yeah, we got also going to talk about Mike Huckabee being hilarious again for our final clip of the day here on this Thursday edition of Newsflash. We are now starting, though, with this. A tweet post on Thursday, President Donald Trump dismissed 5 decades of international consensus on the status of Golan Heights, Syrian territory seized by Israel in 1967 during a preemptive war, declaring the United States would recognize Israel's annexation of the region. So yeah, it's another huge help to Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, who is looking again and again more and more like he pretty much has Donald Trump under his thumb here. Like he's pretty much doing whatever he wants him to do. Whatever Benjamin Netanyahu is pretty much getting Trump to play right into his hand. And after he writes on Twitter, after 52 years, it's time for the United States to finally recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is of critical and strategic security importance to the state of Israel and regional stability. And it's incredible that it's undeniable. 52 years, this has been a fixture in policy consensus in the Middle East. And not only is throwing that off very bad and very disturbing. So yeah, pretty much the idea of like turning it over is not only incredibly bad and just a gift to a country that has possibly committed war crimes and a government that's possibly committed war crimes, but the thing is, it is really dangerous to the region because who knows what it's going to overthrow, you know what I'm saying? So Trump is determined to help Netanyahu, tweets Elizabeth Surkoff. Trump is determined to help Netanyahu, facing 3 corruption indictments, to get reelected in 19 days. International law clearly prohibits settlements and annexation in occupied territory. So yeah, it really looks like an transparent attempt to boost re-election prospects of Benjamin Netanyahu, pretty much. This won't diminish the process of the Kushner plan, says Youssef Munayar on Twitter. Those things were already at zero. Trump is simply campaigning for Netanyahu. Tommy Vietor, the former Obama aide, says this is Trump handing Netanyahu a political gift right before his election, shortly after Bibi joined forces with an overtly racist political party. Again, there is no other way to look at this. Like, unfortunately, for far too long, and I think we're going to do a story in a moment that shows how this is changing, but Trump, people have in the Western media have viewed Trump or Netanyahu as kind of like a slightly right-wing guy who's not that big of a deal. No, he's just like Trump in almost every single way. He's ruthless, he's corrupt, and he runs an awful and oppressive regime against the Palestinians. He occupies their territory. It is an occupation. It's the clinical term for this. What the UN calls it. It's just that simple. So. In reply to Trump's tweet, Mohammed El-Barbade, the former head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, suggested that the American president might want to consult with your international lawyers. Trump's declaration, El-Barbade notes, flies in the face of UN Security Council resolution adopted unanimously in 1967, which called for the withdrawal of Israel forces from the territories occupied in that summer's conflict, including the Golan, as well as the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. It was not lost on some analysts that the U.S. recognition of Israel's right to annex territory it seized by force would also pave the way for Trump to recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea. Trump's declaration is a brazen violation of international law, according to Omar Shakir, who is the Israel and Palestine Director for Human Rights Watch. He says it doesn't change the protections occupied Syrians of Golan have. And moves like this will only further isolate the U.S. from international consensus and make its voice even more relevant. Yeah, and this was happening. Like, we have gone off the grid in this. And such a blatant move. I mean, again, the thing with Trump is we don't know if they're going to follow through on this. We really don't, because it's Trump, and Trump, when he says things, aren't always done. It's kind of like a toddler. You got to check through again and again and again and again to make sure he's actually doing the things he says he's going to do. But if this is done, this is going to really, again, take our voice off the international stage. It's going to give Israel even more power, especially Benjamin Netanyahu more power if he wins this re-election campaign in 19 days to crack down, be more oppressive, and possibly even, as they commit more war crimes. I mean, there is such an interesting thing happening right now. We are seeing more and more an awakening in the Democratic Party especially, but in America as a whole, as to what the hell is going on in Israel, and especially with this government, that some of the human rights abuses that they're committing against the people around them that are starting to not make them look good and take away from the fiery image we all thought that Israel was, because of this broad foreign policy consensus that has been shattered really both from the right and the left. It's really stretching, with people like Ilhan Omar pushing it and Donald Trump pushing it way off the deep end of what everyone thought was possible, which is giving Israel everything they could possibly ever want. Yeah. Standing alongside Secretary Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in Israel for the announcement. Beaming Netanyahu described Trump's gifts to his re-election campaign as a miracle of Purim, the Jewish holiday celebrated this week. He did it again, the Israel Prime Minister said, of American president who seemed determined to make the every wish of Israel's far-right nationalist leader come true. First, he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moved the U.S. Embassy here. Then he got out of the disastrous Iran treaty and reimposed sanctions, and now he did something of equal historic importance. He recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Yeah, so making a racist guy who is cracking down on the rights of other people, especially Muslims in the region, Muslims under his control, making him continuously happy over and over again and making his government continually prosperous is very, very unequivocally bad. So by accepting Israel's 1981 annexation of the Golan Heights, after withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal and moving the U.S. Embassy, Trump also checked off another item on the pro-Israel wish list of one of his biggest donors, the American casino magnate and soon-to-be dead guy, Sheldon Adelson, who spent more than $20 million to support his 2016 presidential campaign and is also Netanyahu's most important backer. So yeah, there is another question is, not just the relationship between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu and their closeness, but the big money that's tying them all together, this big scourge of money in politics in Sheldon Adelson, represented literally in human confined to scooter form. So a measure of how far the White House has tilted away from Israel's favor since Trump tilted in Israel's favor since Trump took office can be seen from reports from 1981 when Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights prompted President Ronald Reagan to respond by ordering a halt to military cooperation, a military operation agreement with Israel. The U.S. and the entire UN Security Council quickly approved a resolution stating that the Israeli decision to impose its laws, jurisdiction, and administration in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights is null and void without international legal effect. As the Israeli-American journalist Mariav Zonzin noted, Jason Greenblatt, the Trump administration official's peace envoy for the region, seemed mildly less excited by the news than Israel's prime minister. So yeah, another bold, courageous, historic decision by POTUS, who understands Israel's security and needs. Yeah, so he's not that pumped. He's just kind of whatever. Yeah, but now we have this support. The question is, where do we go from here? And the answer is more kind of resistance, and we really need to work as a country to make sure that there is another side to the story, because this should, like, the way this is being treated by Donald Trump's people, someone who has said openly anti-Semitic things in the past, shows that, like, we are not, like, the focus of this situation, it's not about combating anti-Semitism, because Steve Bannon, his longtime campaign advisor and ally, has said anti-Semitic things before. So has Trump. So has a lot of other people around him. Like they've all been accused of that. And like there is plenty of dark stuff that they've said, and their belief is they want to move the capital of Israel to Jerusalem because that's what's going to trigger the rapture. Like that's what those evangelical Christians believe. That's what Sheldon Adelson wants. It's also obviously what people like Lindsey Graham want. They want to see Israel kind of like that pick up or trigger the events of the rapture. Like that's literally what's going on here. Yeah. So Yeah, it's a pretty wacky situation. All right, on the other side of things, at the beginning of the year, AIPAC and the pro-Israel lobby were riding high, coming off of 2018, which saw the move of the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and again, no real challenge to the long-standing bipartisan consensus that Israel can do no wrong. A few months can change things, though, as following multiple spats between Representative Ilhan Omar, one of the first Muslim American women to serve in Congress, and both members of her party, both other members of her party, essentially the entire GOP, which characterized criticisms of Omar made of the pro-Israel lobby's influence in America as, quote, anti-Semitic. Multiple Democrats running for president have now come out in defense of Omar, and some of those Democrats have actually announced that they are skipping AIPAC's annual policy conference, which begins this Sunday altogether. After an effort led by the progressive grassroots group Move On, shout out to Move On doing some great work there. We can confirm that they will be Beto O'Rourke, Julian Castro. Not that that matters. Beto O'Rourke, though, is a little bit of it's a pretty big thing because he's one of those big money donors. And we'll get to more in a moment. But the question is, and so many really reporters on the scene have to watch, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Democrats there. Chuck Schumer, I'm sure, is going to be there. Nancy Pelosi. Oh, Nancy Pelosi is going to be there, isn't she? Yeah, we're so screwed. Jesus Christ. So if you didn't know, the thing about AIPAC is it's literally like Benjamin Netanyahu's a branch of Benjamin Netanyahu's American, like the American. What am I trying to say here? It's the American version of like everything Benjamin. It and Benjamin Netanyahu are very ideologically aligned. Like they're on the same parallel. They're both far right. They're both Israeli nationalists. And they hold those beliefs, and that for the long time was considered standard to be on the right wing when opposed to Israel. Like that was what you had to do to be elected in American politics. And the reason why Ilhan Omar is so important and so brave and so bold is she's changing that policy consensus around a huge and major issue that so many people care about. That's why that so many left-wing people really who have been fighting for this issue for such a long time, that's why they want to support her. That's why they really want to protect her, because she's doing some pretty important work here. So, yeah, Beto, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders are the ones who are coming out. So that is Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, a little bit of a surprise. She's actually been pretty more right-wing on Israel than what you might have thought. But you also have Pete Buttigieg, not surprising really. Kamala Harris also came out. If we have her written down, Kamala Harris not going to AIPAC. Harris, interestingly, 2017, gave a nearly 20-minute address at the conference in which Harris called for America's support to be for Israel's security to be rock solid, and she also called for the U.S. to stand with Israel both against both Iran and Hamas, saying, quote, "I'm fully committing to maintaining Israel's qualitative military edge." Last year, The Intercept reported that Harris appeared on the conference again in an off-the-record breakout session for students. And again, that's the important thing. Is she going to try and do that off-the-record type nonsense where she's going to say, "Oh, I'm not going to AIPAC, guys," and try to have her cake and eat it too, and come up, schmooze with donors, do an off-the-record event with students, or whatever she tried to do last year. So O'Rourke too, Beto, seemed to be something similar at the time. He was friendly with AIPAC as recently as the last year during his Senate run in Texas, but this week he announced Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying he has openly sided with racists. Interesting, though. Here's the thing. Dave Weigel pointed out that it's not necessarily a big deal. Traditionally presidential candidates don't give speeches at AIPAC except in election years, but they often talk to closed press sessions. Harris has done so before. We're going to keep a watch if they do see if there will be any discussions with the closed press sessions. That's going to be the one caveat. So it'll be interesting to see now what Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, Amy Klobuchar, John Hickenlooper, and Jay Inslee will do. That is all interesting. So, we now know the Inslee campaign will not be attending. So that's 7 Democrats sticking away from AIPAC, representing a major split and kind of awakening